Welcome to another edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. He is the legendino, the one and only Tim Vickery, based out there in Rio.
And he is the king of nighttime radio, daytime radio, calling and a ruling, Mr. Dotun and Tim.
Although we're talking about two kings today, essentially, the king of, or the kings of the King's Road. Do you see what I did there, Tim?
I did, yeah. Walking down the King's Road.
London SW. Well, it's not SW3 where they are. Is
it? Yeah,
is it still SW3? Okay, Stamford Bridge, SW3. So the kings of the King's Road, and it's called the King's Road. Do you know why?
No, I don't. Good point.
Well, interesting point, actually. Because the king at the time, I can't remember, George III or something like that, at the time, he had some misses down at the other end of the King's Road. So literally he could go directly from Buckingham Palace to see his missus on the sly, of course, because I think he had another missus in Buck's house, and he could go down and see her. And everybody knew, oh, yeah, the king, there he goes in his horse and cart, pretending to be incognito. He's going down the flipping same road. We're going to have to call it the King's Road, mate. That is how it happened. And so World's End, at the very end of King's Road, is where she, the other woman, was located. So as far as the king was concerned, my world starts at Buckingham Palace and ends at the end of King's Road. And of course, Peter Osgood, the great centre forward of Chelsea in the glory days of the 1960s and early 70s, was the king of the King's Road.
Yeah, which I always found funny. I mean, I don't know, he's no longer with us, Peter Osgood, but did you ever hear him speak?
I interviewed him. When he paid tribute to Alan Hutchinson, who was his best mate, who had died just before, and literally maybe just a year before Peter Osgood died. And he's paying tribute to us and say, look, this is my best mate in life. Not only as a Chelsea footballer, he was my best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his wedding. And then a year later, Peter Osgood was gone.
Because he was a country bumpkin, wasn't he? He sounded like one of the Wurzels. Like the idea of a country bumpkin being the king of the King's Road. I've always found that quite funny.
I think that's apt, actually, very apt, because he had a brand new Cumburn Harvester and he was going to lend us the key. This is mad. We haven't even started talking football yet. The other kings, of course, are the kings of the Kop. We're talking about Liverpool versus Chelsea, 3rd of May 2005, semi-final second leg of the Champions League. Or, as I like to describe it, how to kill a mockingbird.
What signs are we looking for here?
Well, Dan. Eminem is in the charts with a song called Mockingbird. And there's a Chuck Berry link to that. I'll come on to that later on. And of course, the great mockingbird of football in recent times has been Jose Mourinho, aka the special one, aka the happy one, aka what would you call him from a Tottenham perspective nowadays?
Well, he wasn't very happy this time, was he? he wasn't happy at all. Although you look at him then, we're going back a bit more than 15 years, and he still looks like a film star.
He does. He's got a little bit of the long hair about him.
Yeah.
But he's got the youthful looks, and he's got the look of somebody that's like, okay, it's 1-0. So what? I am still special. And he says that at the end. He says that at the end of the match, even though they lose 1-0. He says, I'm still special. The person who's not special, let me mock him, me being the mockingbird, is that linesman. What a lino. Do you want to go and see Specsavers? Anyway, it's lots of fun and games. We can't really do this, Tim, without the younger Scouser amongst us in the house. Mark Machado, welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me again, fellas. How's it all going?
Yeah, it's going well, except for you forcing us to do this particular match, because on Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, for those who don't know, we look at a classic match from some time in history, in not necessarily just Premier League history, but in the history of football from anywhere in the world. And you're all welcome to recommend a classic match for us to consider. And we don't just look at the match, of course, we look at the social and cultural circumstances of the time and try and find a way to look at the pop charts of the time as a window to either explain the football or vice versa as well. Why are you forcing us to do something with regards to Liverpool winning? Why was that uppermost on your mind, irrespective of whatever?
All the way
else?
from Wembley.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in a second, indeed.
Well, actually, what I did is I looked at the fixtures, the Premier League fixtures for this weekend, and I noted that the biggest game this weekend is going to be Chelsea versus Liverpool. And I just thought this has become, over the last kind of 15, 20 years or so, this has become quite a big fixture. And I pinned it down to this game. This is the moment, isn't it, when it becomes two ambitious clubs. Actually, the rivalry gets a bit deeper than that, doesn't it? This is the moment when the kind of nouveau rich from West London go up to this kind of crumbling empire of Anfield, and suddenly there's one last battle, one last piece of resistance that stands in the way of Mourinho's men conquering all that season. And, you know, it may or may not have been the ghost of Anfield that got that ball over the line. We don't know, but I just thought this was such a key moment in what is becoming, you know, one of the great rivalries of kind of in the Premier League era. I kind of hate that phrase.
Do you see what he did there, Tim? He did a couple of things. He did a couple of slide moves. I thought it was skillful for a winger, so to speak. And he's always out on the wing, isn't he, of this Brazilian shirt name podcast. But you saw what he did, how he dribbled. He started off with that, you know, the nouveau riche bit. Yeah, do you know that? Yeah. Unlike us, the poor working class of Liverpool, when we were lads, we didn't have any wealth at all, of course. And you saw amongst the spectators at this match, one banner saying, "You can't buy this one, Chelsea," as the camera pans to Roman Abramovich.
Is that still, 15 years later, is that accusation still thrown at Chelsea, or is their status now accepted?
I think what's happened, right, in that kind of 15-year period, you've seen basically very rich men from across the world come in and buy football clubs. And then about kind of 10 years ago, you started seeing just whole states buying football clubs in the way that Man City and PSG and other people. And now also you've got, you know, you look at Germany and what's going on with Leipzig, and you've got just huge corporations buying football clubs. So, you know, it used to be in the good old days, and Liverpool was a great example of this, where just the kind of richest family in the village owned the football club. Then it became the richest person in the country owned the football club, and now it's whole countries own football clubs. So, but that said, I think to a degree that is still kind of leveled at them. Thing is, he's been there for so long now that people are almost starting to forget about it.
You see, I don't think it is levelled at them anymore. I think Mark is absolutely right when he says that, look, since 15 years ago, what we've seen in Premier League football certainly is that so many other wealthy and arguably sometimes wealthier people, if you're talking about Manchester City, have bought football clubs. And Chelsea almost seems like an also-ran. You know, they were able to carry that mantle of we are the richest football team in Britain for maybe about 5 years of Abramski's rule, and then suddenly other teams caught up with them. Even Charlton, as you know, is looking for a wealthy benefactor. If there's anybody out there, save us soon. But Chelsea now, with Abramovich having been persona non grata in the United Kingdom for the last few years, I think he's living in Israel now, so he can't go back to Russia. He's not at the moment welcome here in the United Kingdom, but that might change. I suppose the iconic image of a rich billionaire coming and buying up a UK club for Chelsea, that luster has gone somewhat and other clubs have taken over.
Can I just add as well? I think there's something quite romantic in it. I think there's something like, I like to think if I ended up being a billionaire, I mean, I'm not sure how that's going to happen, how, you know, essentially I'll make podcasts in my mum's spare room. Spare bedrooms, but if I
except for today, you're making it your ex-girlfriend's pad, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know this, Tim? I mean,
no, this is news to me. Well, it's usually Dotun who has an ex in every port.
Well, listen, my missus listens to this, mate. Let me just say that was a joke. For goodness sake, Tim.
It was all research purposes for his book, Carol.
But the police sirens are still outside. Whenever Mark joins us, there are police sirens going crazy. How far away are you from Wembley Stadium as we speak, Mark?
I'm about a 15-minute walk away from Wembley Stadium. I'm
50?
Right. 15.
Oh, I think that's better. That's better. I was like 50. That's one end of Wembley to the other end of South London, isn't it? 50-minute walk.
Yeah, more or less. No, but I'm right by North Wembley Station. I'm opposite a big park where Wembley FC are based. If anyone knows where that is, I'm right there. So
sorry, Mark. Thanks, Tim. You wanted to say
one thing that this may burst people's bubble, but one thing looking back at these games, because it was a two-legged game when it was 0-0 at the Bridge and then 1-0 at Anfield. As spectacles, great atmosphere maybe, but in comparison with today, it's ugly, isn't it? It's ugly. It's
a lot of tackles, a lot of hard tackles coming in, flying in.
You look at the two coaches, Benitez and Mourinho. They're maybe a bit of a caricature, especially for Mourinho, but they're primarily defensive organisers. Mm. And you look at the way the things have gone subsequently, and it's just so much more attractive today. These were really attritional games. These are two games settled by one goal that probably wasn't a goal.
Oh, Mark, do you want to quickly add something in there?
Dotun, ultimately, it doesn't matter if it was or wasn't a goal. It was given at that moment. So
yeah, and I think the whole thing's a red herring anyway because it was a penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and possibly a sending off as well.
Yeah, maybe according to the rules as they were done that time. But see, he gets a lot of criticism from does Pep Guardiola. But when you look back and think that this was a Champions League semi-final, I think how much good he's done football. Because first of all, he came up with something when everything looked to be going the way of attrition and athleticism. He came up with something radically different, and then others had to find a way to counter it. And look at that little bubble we had in Lisbon with the Champions League games. They were great. They were fantastic. None of them were like this horrible kind of attritional stuff, which is dramatic, but as a spectacle is not great. So that really struck me looking back on these games from a distance of 15 years.
The difference between this match and the bubbles in Portugal that you talk about is, well, the Anfield faithful were at their loudest in this match. So yeah. You start off the match and you're thinking, if you're Chelsea, you can't hear yourselves think. Of course, the Liverpool players are more used to it. They know what it's like when...
I missed all that at the time because I remember watching this game. I can't remember why, but I was in São Paulo. I think I was doing a game that night. So I had to find a place to watch the game. And it was I found a little bar. This is before English football has become the huge phenomenon that it is now in Brazil. So it wasn't that big or anything like that. So I found a little bar to watch the game in with the sound down. So I missed all of the atmosphere, and all I had was the game, which wasn't great. So I feel like I was robbed of the best part of it.
Yeah, Mark, you've been obviously to Anfield when your lot are making the noisy neighbour rule, as it were, or making it all come true in that respect. What's it like with a lot of noise in the Kop or elsewhere in the ground?
I think the key to this, when you talk about the atmosphere, is Liverpool scoring early. When you're at Anfield, and if Liverpool don't score after about 30 minutes, you can really start to feel, I at least I feel that you can start to feel the anxiety and tension build up. And one of the things when you go to Anfield now and you watch Jurgen Klopp in the dugout is, as well as kind of keeping an eye on what's going on in the field, he kind of orchestrates the crowd as well. And he at first I used to be kind of embarrassed about the fact that he used to come out and just try and G the crowd up, because it's like, this is Anfield, this is what we're meant to be famous for. But actually you realise a lot of the time he's trying to control that tempo. And I think one of the reasons why he's been so successful the last couple of seasons is he's managed to kind of harness that. I was going to say Rafa, but Liverpool get lucky because they get that goal so early on that even though they end up having to defend for the rest for essentially another 90 minutes because the game ends up being 96 minutes long, they're still in the lead, which keeps the kind of crowd happy and it keeps them buoyant. And
I think it keeps them nervous. Oh, they look as if they're biting their nails right throughout because they can see. I think the spectators know that the Chelsea striking force can penetrate Liverpool and that they're going to be a handful. You know, you've got people like Didier Drogba on the pitch. You've got Frank Lampard doing his best, and we all know that he's got an engine in him. He can get goals, but he can also service the front too. Ida Good Johnson, I think, was up front. Missed a couple of real easy sitters, by the way. But let's start with that goal because, as you say, it's 4 minutes into the match. And by the way, it'll be interesting to see if how Liverpool do this season without the Kop. That is a real big question mark for you. Like if Jurgen Klopp is using the spectators to increase or keep up the pace of the football on the pitch. We'll see what happens this season. But should we start with that goal, which, Tim, I suppose was something of, it's a scrappy goal at the very least, but in a way...
It's quite well worked. You got, is it Reiser coming in from the left and the ball in, and then Gerrard's
Reiser. Just any time you need a Scandinavian correction, just turn to your Uncle Dotun.
Yeah, Uncle D serves for these things, and then a little chip from Gerrard over the top. And then I think, is it Baros?
Yeah.
He's brought down by Czech. When it's a penalty, but you know, advantage is played, and Luis Garcia with a little poke, not the cleanest of connections, and Gallas. Yeah, I take Mourinho's point that how could the linesman see that it had clearly the whole of the ball had crossed the line? But as I say, it was a penalty anyway. So you know, maybe coaches do this all the time to deflect responsibility from their own. You know, because his Chelsea side had played 180 minutes plus the 6 minutes of injury time that Mark sweated through, and they hadn't managed to score once. So a coach has to take some kind of responsibility for that. Far easier just to blame the linesman.
But that goal on the 4th minute, Mark, does change the game. As much as you lot are celebrating, and Tim started off by talking about how defensive certainly the first leg was, and probably the second leg would have been as well. I think both coaches would have been happy to either go to extra time or, if necessary, go to penalties or whatever it was at the time. But at that point, the game switches. The formation, the setup for Chelsea certainly changes, and I think for Liverpool as well.
I don't think anyone at Liverpool would have expected to have scored so early. I think it's quite obvious that they were expecting to kind of defend most of that and try and score, grab one on the break if possible. You look at that Liverpool side, you look at that starting 11, and you're like, you take Steven Gerrard out of it, and it's incredibly mediocre. And you're like, most of those players are probably squad players at best if they get anywhere near the Chelsea squad. You look at that Liverpool midfield behind Gerrard, it's Hamann and Bishkan, and you're like, you know, I really like Didi Hamann. I think he's a great character and was very good at what he did, but he's not. I don't think he's anywhere near world class. And Igor Bishkan, how he ended up in the Champions League semi-final is quite incredible. But I think what the players did have though is they worked hard. And I think they worked hard to basically do anything they could to stop that ball going back into the back of the net.
The Chelsea players worked hard as well. You know, I mean, you say this is what Rafa Benitez was saying. Oh yeah, we got there by hard work, and I'm like, well, but Chelsea worked hard as well. It's something more than just hard work, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, in a low-scoring game, the one decision that goes against you can it has huge consequences. Hence the push for VAR and
an unlimited edition, an unlimited supply.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately there is an unlimited supply of VAR, isn't there? No, there's too much of it. Take it away. But I was struck when I looked at the teams. I was struck by exactly that point that Mark made. Blimey, how many of those from Liverpool were getting to today's side? Not many, Benny. You know, I can't see many of them getting in. I wonder how many of them are really remembered, and I wonder in the future how Liverpool fans. I know that the win in 2005 is much more dramatic than the win last year, which was a kind of dull final ruined by the ref. If only VAR had intervened and stopped the penalty in the first minute against Sissoko. But I wonder in the future if 2005 will be remembered with anything like the same affection of 2019. Maybe that the dramatic comeback puts it onto a level that, in terms of the quality of the football played throughout the competition, it doesn't quite deserve.
Look, I agree with you on in terms of some of these Liverpool players, but let's not forget Jamie Carragher gets man of the match. Yeah, he's at central. He's central back, isn't he? He gets man of the match. Hippier, the tall, brave Finn, you couldn't get a flipping.
Is that how you say it?
I would, but I'm not. I don't speak Finnish as a different language. All I can say in Finnish is "Saatan perkele," and I'll tell you a joke another time about how this Finnish girl, nothing to do with me this time, okay? But she happened to be, visiting me.
Had she already finished with you?
Very good. Anyway, I'll tell you a joke, a Swedish joke. Everybody in Sweden will love it when I tell it another time. But Hippier, I mean, he was hard to get a ball past. You can't score past Hippier. He's like the proper wall or bust that Jose Mourinho would talk about. And you've got Didier Hamann, as Mark's already said. You've got Steve Gerrard up front. Jan Arne Riise, his problem was he was one-footed. He could do anything on his left foot. It was his left foot, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah. Lots of left-footers are like that. That's part of the magic of being left-footers.
He could score from 90 metres away from goal as long as it was on his left foot. So everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So he becomes ineffective if everybody knows you've only got one foot. And apart from that, Luis Garcia wasn't a bad player. Milos Baros, I think for his team, his national team, he wasn't bad. Didn't you sign him after a World Cup or European Championship?
He was there while, at one point when he was at Liverpool, he went to Euros and he ended up being top goal scorer. And I think
that was it.
There were some rumours about AC Milan trying to come in with a huge offer. And I think they must have gone onto YouTube and looked for his Liverpool highlights and probably said, nah, maybe it's not one for us. But there's a lot of players who I suspect were signed on the hope that they were very good young talent, but then when they got to the top, to the top level, I mean, they weren't quite good enough. I mean, like Louis Garcia is one of those players I absolutely loved watching because he had that moment of brilliance in him. It's just that, he has a moment of brilliance against Chelsea and scores this ghost goal, but then you'd watch him against, a mid-table team in the Premier League and it'd be like you hadn't even turned up. I don't think that's anything to do. I don't think it's a mentality thing. I just think he couldn't get the consistency in his performances, which is a bit of a shame.
Liverpool at that time, they were buying lots of French under-17 stars and something, and most of them didn't come off. Most of them were I suppose they were relatively low money gambles, but they didn't come off.
Yeah, well, if you look what happens at Liverpool in the next few years is they win the Champions League that season, then they kind of use that money and reinvest it a little bit to get to the Champions League final again in 2007. Buy Torres, kind of get to second place in the Premier League. Then they sell the club to two Americans who basically leveraged huge amounts of debt against the club and effectively run the club into the wall. And the reason why that's allowed to happen,
they fell out with each other as well. They started off as friends and they fell out with each other over this Liverpool thing. Those two Americans whose names I don't remember.
Yeah, Hicks and Gillette. And the reason why they ended up owning the club is because the owners who own the club at this point just effectively go, we don't have enough money to keep the club investing in the club what it needs to stay at the level it's at.
Rafa's strategy. Well, you're not going to win the league with Rafa, are you?
I actually think he's probably one of the most underrated managers ever in the Premier League because he gets a lot out of players. Yeah. I think maybe if you look back and you reflect back at his last stint in Newcastle, where I think the Newcastle fans by the end of it were a little bit sick of him, and then what Steve Bruce goes on to achieve once he takes over, I think Newcastle fans are possibly a bit frustrated. But I think the problem with Rafa is he's never had a clear shot where he's been given the backing off a board with a bit of money and been allowed to develop his own ideas. The closest he gets to that is when it's about 2 or 3 seasons after this, when he's got Torres and Mascherano and Alonso and Gerrard at Liverpool. And that's kind of Rafa's team at that point. But even that, I think he was probably a little bit short budget-wise to get the squad he needs. And also by that stage, you've got Chelsea and Man United just with giant squads of packed full of world-class players. So he was still quite behind the pace. So I always feel a bit bad about Rafa, because I do think if he'd had the kind of backing that Klopp has at Liverpool, he probably would have won the league. Yeah.
I tend to agree with you, actually. I think that's a good summation of him. And his time at Newcastle was just, emblematic of that to a certain extent, because, he was working with an owner that didn't want to spend much money, and he got the stick for it. And I think he had enough by the end of it, and thought, sod this for a laugh, I'll go off to China and earn a little bit of cash. But I think he wants to come back very, very quickly, and I'm sure he will take jobs that he once had. But compared to the Liverpool squad, the Chelsea squad with the likes of Carvalho, which you'll know more about than I will, Tim, and John Terry, of course. I mean, you can't nutmeg him as much as you try. William Gallas, Makelele, the central midfield marshal. We've already mentioned Lampard and Gudjonsson, Drogba, Joe Cole. Well, something of a maverick, because I think is the kindest way to talk about him. But I wonder whether this match, Tim, isn't a match of two goalies. Cech, we've already mentioned how he was decisive and not successfully decisive in flattening Milos Baros to stop him scoring. And then Jerzy Dudek, that's a goalkeeper, shot stopper, and arguably he saved Liverpool's embarrassment, because when Chelsea got going, they could have put 3 or 4 past Liverpool.
Well, he makes one terrific save from a set piece. From
yes.
Lampard from range. I don't think Chelsea created enough against him. I don't really see. I know they brought on Robin and so on, but I don't really see the point of having Gallas at left back. I think that's for me. That's a negative move, and how thin the line is, because right at the end, Dudek nearly throws it away, doesn't he? When he comes for a cross, he didn't really have to come for it. He doesn't get the cleanest of punches, and it's that one where it's set up for Gudjonsson. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Gudjonsson, very good.
Yeah, will that do? And that's the moment, where Dudek could have been the villain. Sometimes the line is so thin between hero and villain.
Well, funny you should say that. And let's take a look at the charts of the time to see what we can glean from that.
Signs? What are the signs?
Very good. Yes, there are signs there, definitely. We'll come on to the signs in just a moment. Lots and lots of signs. What you said about thin line between hero and villain, this is a problem for a lot of artists. There is a really thin line between genius and mediocrity when it comes to the arts. And every pop star knows that, first of all, when they write a song, they can be laughed out of the place, because just getting a line wrong or just getting the tone of a song lyric wrong. And
imagine if your first line is this the way to Amarillo, and someone says yes.
You've got to rhyme. No, you've got to rhyme Amarillo with pillow. Do you remember? You've got to rhyme Amarillo, and this is the thing: there aren't that many rhymes of Amarillo. So you think, oh, pillow, but am I going to be laughed to kingdom come if I rhyme Amarillo with pillow? It's a very good point you put there. It's number 2 in the charts this weekend of this. Or this week of this dramatic match between Liverpool and Chelsea, 3rd of May 2005. It's number 2 in the charts. Tony Christie, it's a classic already, with Peter Kay, the comedian, on it. You don't really hear much of him on it, but nevertheless, he's there. He's the one that's given it a new lease of life after Tony Christie's original, which would have been about the early 70s, I reckon, would it? The original.
Neil Sedaka. Was it Neil Sedaka, the original?
But didn't Tony Christie do it?
Yeah, sorry, they're blended into one in my mind.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, probably Neil Sedaka. Well, Oh Carol and all of that. Was it Neil Sedaka, Oh Carol? It was, wasn't it? Oh Carol. Yeah. Neil Sedaka. I ought to know that. Sung it enough times in my bedroom, but nevertheless,
I am just a fool.
I
Does she treat you cruel? You do seem a little bit scared of her.
Yeah, I'm definitely very scared, as everybody should be of their misses. But it's number 2 in the charts, and I think it's a blinder actually of a tune. And the fact that it comes
I
back
agree.
again, Mark, for your generation with Peter Kay, you know,
it's one of those anthemic songs, isn't it? It's what really surprises me when we do this podcast and you send the chart round is how many kind of novelty songs end up in the UK charts, considering we pride ourselves, you know, when we go abroad, we listen to the kind of stuff they listen to in other countries and go, well, obviously in Britain, we're the home of the Beatles and David Bowie, we wouldn't listen to any of this stuff. But actually, we love novelty music. Good point. I think this track is the best of it, isn't it? This is the best of it. This is as good as it gets.
It's also, I think it's just, it puts joy in you. I don't know if you were working at BBC Radio London when a lot of the TV crew got into trouble because one of them was going off to Al Jazeera to work. Do you remember that? And they did a video.
I've heard about this, but it was a bit before my time there.
It got in the papers. Imagine, Tim. So you're working for BBC Radio London, a local BBC radio station in the capital, and I don't know if it was the front page of things like the Sun newspaper, but basically everybody wanted to have a pop at the BBC. Yeah, where's our license money going to? And then there's this lot from BBC Radio London who've done this private video for themselves because their colleague is like a going away gift for their colleague who's going to work for Al Jazeera. And so they do, is this the way to Al Jazeera? And they start wearing all this sort of like Arab clobber and everything like that. So the paper's like, oh, they're taking the piss out of the Arabs and this we can't do anymore since 9/11. It's a very serious thing. And is this the way that they use license payers' money? I thought, what a flipping tribute to Tony Christie, this genius of musical entertainment in the UK. But to have this video do a parody of what he's done, and it was a brilliant video. It's a brilliant, you know, a couple of my mates got caught up in that. I'll be honest, Kurt Barling, now Professor Kurt Barling of the University of Middlesex, he's there wearing some Arab clobber doing it. Is this the way to Al Jazeera? It was hilarious. And I think it captured the mood of people in this country. Remember, this is the week of the 60th anniversary of VE Day. Yeah? So either you're going to play Vera Lynn.
2 weeks before the London bombing, 2 months before the London bombings as well, isn't it?
Very good point. The London Underground bombings, which would have been, well, it was a shocking time in London, really shocking time. And very good point that you make there. Perhaps we'll come back to it as well. So this is kind of the end of innocence for us. I didn't look at the charts in that way, but it is the end of our innocence, you know. That bombing did certainly change things in London and also right around the country as well. But going back to VE Day, Vera Lynn is the icon of the Second World War. Okay, and she's in the papers telling people about a private party at Buckingham Palace just before VE Day, so they knew the war was going to end. And the likes of Tommy Trinder was there with her. She pulls out this name from, you know, the musical days of the 40s, and you think, go on, Dame Vera, go on, tell us what it was like. She says, yes, the King was there, the Queen was there, and the 2 princesses, one of whom, of course, is now Her Majesty the Queen, were there. And they, as they always do with Dame Vera Lynn, and she's like 88 at this point in 2005, and as they always do with Dame Vera Lynn, they have to remind a younger audience, you know, Mark's age group, no, this was the woman that got us through the war, and she had 2 iconic songs, We'll Meet Again or White Cliffs of Dover. And I sat there reading this and I think, yeah, but which of them? Which of those 2 songs? You've got a woman that's got 2 iconic songs, We'll Meet Again and White Cliffs of Dover. Which is the more pertinent song, or perhaps even the better one? Which is the better song for you, Tim? White Cliffs of Dover?
I think that We'll Meet Again is more versatile.
You reckon?
Yeah. And White Cliffs of Dover, I think, is very specific of that moment. We'll Meet Again. I mean, the early 70s, the Faces, with Rod Stewart, were a great band, but a very, very drunken band as well. They used to end up their gigs singing, you know, We'll Meet Again. Don't know where, don't know when.
But that's kind of taking the mickey to a certain extent. Whereas
No, it serves a function, doesn't it?
Okay.
The idea of we'll all get together again. I think that's music should bring joy to people, and it should serve some kind of social function. And the
I
idea of
agree.
celebrating a future meeting, I think that's great.
But if we're talking about Prince Buster, is his greatest song, the one that they play all over the place now, which is Enjoy Yourself. It's later than you think. That's the one that has been his legacy, certainly in the UK. Whereas, hang on a second, for us aficionados of the original ska and the king of the original ska, Prince Buster, that's not his best track, is it? Do you know what I mean?
No, but Vera Lynn probably didn't rate those two amongst her greatest songs, but they were the ones that hit a spot. Sometimes that can be like a toilet seat around an artist's neck. I mean, it is for Jeff Beck with Hi Ho Silver Lining. Yeah, absolutely. He's always hated it.
Yeah.
Just despite, he's a serious, very earnest, serious guitarist, and he's famous for this drunken party sing-along song. He hates it. But
if he hates it so, yeah, exactly. If he hates it so much, he should go crying all the way to the bank and deciding to give those royalties to the more needy because he hates it that much. No, I'd give him some respect. Say, look, I can't stand the tune, so I'm going to give all the money to this charity. I'd love him for it. I still think, though, We'll Meet Again versus White Cliffs of Dover. White Cliffs of Dover is the poetic one. There'll be bluebirds singing, whatever the rest of it is.
Is the White Cliffs of Dover track in the current political climate, is it a bit politicised now?
Oh,
Maybe.
you see, you had to bring that in, didn't you? You had to bring Brexit in.
But
this has been a Brexit-free podcast until just that moment that you brought it in, Mark. Why'd you have to do that?
Because I think for a whole generation of people now, whenever you see the White Cliffs of Dover, there's probably some Brexiteer or right-winger shouting about immigrants or the EU or fishing quotas or something, or that most of us really don't care about or is inconsequential to our life, I imagine. And therefore, I wonder if you're looking at what songs to play, if you've got to put a virulent package together, if you're making TV or radio, do you play that or do you stay away from it? Just because of the connotations of it.
Mark has just answered the point that I made as we went into this segment of the conversation, Tim, which is for an artist, there is a thin line between genius and mediocrity. Imagine Vera Lynn all those years ago singing this love song, if you like, for all those forces, British forces that are fighting to defend this country in some far off field that will forever be England, or was once upon a time in any case. She wasn't thinking about Brexit. That's almost besmirching the memory of all the people that she was singing to when she sang, I've got the lyrics now, there'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Just you wait and see. Now, I agree with Mark. The sentiment might be somewhat tragic when people are getting into what are effectively bathtubs to paddle their way over the English Channel to get to the White Cliffs of Dover. That would sit uneasily with me. I think there is a way, though, for the poetry of that song to still pay tribute to people who are losing their lives in the Channel. We know one person confirmed lost his life trying to get over, and there'll be many more, I don't doubt.
It's obviously a symbol of something, and the symbol can be used in various ways, couldn't it? It can be a symbol of hope of somebody who's trying to get there, or the symbol of our fortress for those who don't want them to get there. So the song can be interpreted in different ways.
I think you've got a point there, actually. And one's reminded of Mr. Hitler looking across the channel from Le Touquet, I think it is, in northern France, when, of course, the Germans had invaded northern France, and he looked over and he saw the White Cliffs of Dover, and he probably saw them as a fortress. He thought, flipping heck, how on earth am I going to do a William the Conqueror?
As I love to mention, the theme tune to Dad's Army, Who Do You Think You Are Kidding, Mr. Hitler? Bud Flanagan wasn't his real name. He was son of Jewish immigrants, poor Polish immigrants. It's something like Jaime Wiseman or something like that. Some are very, very, very Jewish
Like
name.
AC Olsen,
Yeah,
Al
indeed.
Jolson.
Yes. The immigrant contribution, it just goes on and on and on and on. And we're all the better for it, for all those people from elsewhere who've come in, seen the White Cliffs of Dover as a point of entry, and then enriched what we have inside our little fortress.
But do you know that Premiership managers, they were called Premiership managers, they're essentially Premier League managers as we would know them now, they were asked to give their predictions on what would happen ahead of the 3rd of May 2005 match. Now, which one of these managers refused to comment? Let me run through them. They asked Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Alan Kirbishley of the mighty Charlton Athletic, Stuart Pearce of Manchester City, Harry Redknapp of Portsmouth, David O'Leary of Aston Villa, Alan Perrin of Portsmouth, and Martin Jol of Tottenham. Which one of those many managers do you think, Tim, refused to comment on this?
Well, if it was the BBC who asked him, obviously Ferguson weren't going to give no reply.
I forgot about that. Do you want to explain that one?
He fell out. He fell out.
Yeah, because of some comment. It was a comment that one of our BBC sports journalists had made. It might even have been a business journalist, and it implicated somebody in Alex Ferguson's family in the conversation, and he thought, stuff you lot, I'm not going to speak to you again. So for years it was the Manchester United number 2 who had to face up to the cameras according to the contract that they had with the BBC, paying millions and millions of pounds.
Do you think that either Dame Vera or Sir Alex, do you think either of them ever got down to Snoop Doggy Dogg?
I bet Sir Alex has.
I reckon he has. I reckon you're absolutely right there. Because Sir Alex, and I met him once, the only time I met him, I didn't realise I was coming down from Manchester on a Sunday after doing a show there, coming down on the train on a Sunday, get off at Euston Station, and as I make my way from the back of the carriage towards the front of the carriage of the train, where the first class is, he suddenly comes off the train. I was like, I can't believe it. And I was like, what shall I say? What shall I do? And I thought, I'd leave him, okay? So I'm going out of Euston Station by the side entrance. Who should I bump into again? Just getting into, putting his suit into the back of a taxi, like a large form taxi, but it's Alex Ferguson. And this time I cannot resist it. I went up to him and I said, Sir Alex, man, all I want to do is shake your hands. And he was like, he shook my hands and like, yeah, you could see he was like comfortable, me, a bad boy coming up to him. He was very comfortable. And later on that day, I realized why he was down. It was because it was Andy Murray in the final of the Wimbledon Championships and about to win the Wimbledon Championships as a Brit.
And it may have been Snoop Doggy Dogg at the Brixton Academy as well. Maybe he was going to take in a double header.
And no doubt Snoop Doggy Dogg would have been at Wimbledon as well to see Andy Murray win the men's title for Scotland. Because Alex Ferguson wasn't the only person there. Alex Salmond of the SNP was there as well. I remember him pulling out a Scottish flag, to just show people that this Andy Murray ain't winning it for you, like he's winning it for us. Okay, that was a great moment. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, it was Sir Alex Ferguson's. He says I'm not getting into that, but interestingly enough, the others got into it. Arsene Wenger. Who do you think he thought was going to win, Mark?
Chelsea,
Tim?
I'm trying to look back from the perspective of 15 years ago, and I'm thinking that Chelsea then, in a way, were where City are now. Won all the Premier, the domestic titles, and the one that they haven't got, the one that they really want, is the continental title, the Champions League. Liverpool are despite the fact, if you look at the two teams, the Chelsea team looks to have more quality. Liverpool have, they're standing on the shoulders of giants of all the previous Champions League wins, and Chelsea don't have that. So I wonder if that's going to be a factor in what Arsene thinks.
Well, you're very perceptive. He says, look, the result in the first game suits Chelsea because they're not a team who like to take the initiative. I thought that was so damning, actually. For Jose Mourinho's Chelsea, he parks the bus, of course, when he has to. Can Liverpool up the tempo to put them under pressure? That's a problem Liverpool have to sort out, he says. How to attack without conceding against Chelsea. It's essentially it in a nutshell, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, I think it is. But again, it shows you how things have changed, because these are two sides that are set up not to concede. And these days, to win the Premier League, for example, you've got to set out to win the games, haven't you? Every game that you don't win is points lost. So the teams now, Liverpool and City and so on, they are set up to win and not to contain. And they're willing to take the risks of conceding in order to score goals themselves. So I think the standard of the spectacle today is so much better than it was 15 years ago.
Tim, though, is that a cultural thing in terms of the club? So if you look back at where Chelsea were at that moment, they're about 18 months into Abramovich taking over. They've had one season under Ranieri. They haven't won anything. They've kind of fallen short of, at key moments in that season. Second season, Mourinho comes in. He's the fresh young manager. He's the current holder of the Champions League. He just won it with Porto. And at that point, he's allowed to do whatever it takes for Chelsea to win, because he's allowed to basically set the culture for this new era that they're about to embark on. You look at Liverpool just happy to be there at that point, which, across Liverpool's history, this is, one of the few times that they'd be able to get away with playing quite defensive as well, where now I feel the big clubs in Europe and I think there's some clubs that will win defensively and their fans will accept it, and there's other clubs that won't. I think you saw this with Mourinho when he went to Man United, where this style of play he was bringing in just wouldn't work. And I think you'll probably end up seeing it at White Hart Lane as well.
Please don't taunt me with this. Yeah.
Sorry, where the Spurs faithful just won't be happy with this, even if he goes on long winning runs, winning 1-0. And I think that it's becoming part of the way clubs market themselves. And it's, Barcelona, people like that talking about being more than a club. I think that's all part of, it's all related to the style that they play in as well. And we were just at that moment, when you look at these two teams, and they were at a moment where they were allowed to give their managers space to be able to play like that.
Well, this is why I think that Rafa would never win you the league, because he wouldn't take the risks necessary to win the number of games. But in this kind of format of competition, where you can win on away goals, where not conceding is sometimes even more important than scoring. You don't want to concede at home because of the away goals rule.
Yeah.
So I think Rafa was the right coach for a cup campaign, but not for a team that wanted to win the league.
Yeah, the cup campaign is crucial in this, isn't it? Because how do you play in the Premier League? I mean, interesting that some of these managers, you should know better, are talking about the form in the Premier League to describe or to second guess who is going to who's going to win. Harry Redknapp in Porto. I actually think this is a decent comment, but he's still talking about the form. He said first leg was a terrific performance from Liverpool. Benitez set his team up well. Chelsea, though, are still favourites, but European nights at Anfield, there's nothing like it in the world. The place will be absolutely incredible. It will be a great second leg. Chelsea are only the slight favourites for him because of their Premier League form at that time.
Well, no, he's thinking away goals as well. He's thinking that Chelsea haven't conceded at home. So they get one away, and Liverpool have got to get two.
And his nephew's the star player for Chelsea as well.
Yeah, but I don't think that. Oh, come on, give Harry a chance now, mate. You don't honestly think.
I don't know, Dotun. The way I was brought up, if that was Wembley FC and my cousin was playing for them, and they were playing against Real Madrid in a friendly, I'd still back Wembley FC. That's just the way it is, isn't it?
I love what Martin Jol in Tottenham manager at the time, says. If Robben and Duff. Remember Duff, such a great winger. So he's basically saying if Chelsea play the wingers game, if Robben and Duff are playing, they stand a chance. Chelsea are not the same, and Liverpool without them, and Liverpool have proved to have been a very tactically clever team. Chelsea,
I think that's really perceptive because it's Chelsea without the wingers, and I go back to the point of Gallas at left back. So you've got somebody who can't really offer you a great deal going forward there. Because you have to look at it.
Where should Gallas have played in that match?
He's a centre-back.
I know he is, but where should he have played? In his natural position?
Or on the bench. I don't know what resources they had there to someone who could come in and do a more attacking job at left-back. But Jose is thinking there of
Glenn Johnson, right? He was I think he was in and around Chelsea at that time, and he could have played.
Yeah, he was at right back. He played the first leg.
Yeah.
Now I'm not sure if he was fully fit. Jeremy played right back second leg. But again, Chelsea have to look at themselves after playing nearly 200 minutes and not scoring a single goal.
And the reason why I ask about Gallus is once the goal goes in, as we've said, it goes in very early on in the match, 4 minutes in. Once that goal goes in, he can't continue, even if he's in his central back position. He can't continue in that position because
it changes the whole thing, doesn't it?
Exactly.
As soon as a goal goes in, that has to change the planning.
So where should he have played afterwards? Then do you think?
Well, if you take him off, You don't need if you've got to get a goal. How much do you need a defensive left back if you're without your normal wingers?
You see, this is amazing because this podcast is basically telling Jose Mourinho what he should have done. It is 15 years ago.
He knows much better than we do.
No, not necessarily.
Can I just intersect there, Dotun? I reckon if Tim was, in doing commentary before the game for that game, he would have said, "Look, Liverpool are clearly quite narrow. I don't really understand why he's made that decision. Why Jose hasn't basically tried to stretch a team out, because if your team is playing narrow, then the thing you want to do is try and stretch them out, because if they're still compact, that's when they're going to be able to keep their shape better. With Rafa, he's going to have them keeping the shape. If you kind of stretch them out, that's when you're going to get those one-on-ones. So it's a really peculiar decision that he's made. In hindsight, obviously, if that goal doesn't happen in the 4th minute and it's a 0-0 draw or Chelsea score a goal late on, then it's a totally different result, and we probably never end up talking about this game ever again.
I'm sure that he planned, Mourinho, to, as you were saying, Mark, about the crowd. I'm sure he planned for nothing to happen for 30 minutes, to quieten the crowd, and then he can make his changes in the second half. But obviously, someone called Gallas should be playing at the back.
Tim, that was unnecessary, mate. I have to give you a pronunciation lesson in French as well. C'est Gallas. C'est pas Gallas. Okay, let's look at the charts again.
Lacks a certain je ne sais quoi, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad you got there in the end. One on plus, je t'aime. Look, have you heard of Bobby Vinton, Mark? Have you heard of Bobby Vinton?
No, I don't think I have.
Tim, man, these youngers, do we have to school them? You've never ever heard this song, She Wore Blue?
Oh, I've heard that song,
Yeah? You've heard that song?
Yeah.
And you've heard one of his other hits as well, I'm waiting.
I don't know which one.
Oh, you haven't heard one where he sings, I'm so lonely. Hi, Mr.
Oh, yes, I have heard that song. Yeah,
you have heard that song because it's number 1 in the charts in this week. Although more contemporary version by the Afro.
I hadn't realised it was a cover of.
Of course it is. Do you hear? Why is he doing that fast, speeded up little? Yeah, I'm lonely. I'm so lonely. I'm Mr. Lonely. I'm lonely at the very beginning. You didn't realise that?
No, I hadn't sussed that. My God. Wow.
I'm going to have to school both of you then. I thought you, being a veteran, would know these old tunes. Before I was born, of course. No, actually, it's not.
No, I remember the original, but I just hadn't clocked.
Hadn't clicked.
That Akon was doing a cover.
Yeah. It's a cover. Although what he does to it is really refreshing because the original wasn't the best song in the world. It was like going back to the Guy Mitchell days of, cry, cry, cry. I'm crying. I'm so lonely.
It's lame self-pity.
It is actually. I'm so lonely. Call me Mr. Lonely. I am lonely.
For Christ's sake, pull yourself together.
Well, this is the great
There's a world out there that's full of people.
Exactly. This is the great thing about Akon. What Akon has done to the song is take it away from the self-pity. It is still, you can't get away with, making it not about yourself because it is about you being lonely. But what he does is turn it into a lady's favorite, because basically what a lot of male singers do is aim their songs at the women. They know. I mean, that's what Biggie used to say.
Yeah.
That's what Biggie...
You know what the secret of Dean Martin's career was?
What was that?
Sing to the men.
Yeah, well,
You've got the women already.
No.
Sing to the men.
He's got the women already, because he didn't have much competition. The ladies want the bad boy, don't they? If you're going for the Rat Pack, who are you going to go for? You're going to go for Frank Sinatra, or you're going to go for Dean Martin? You're going to go for Sammy Davis Jr., or you're going to go for Dean Martin? Dean Martin features in every comparison of the Rat Pack. So he's got the ladies. He can do that. Dean Martin can do that. Akon, he's got nice pecs on him, but I wouldn't know because I'm a bloke and I ain't interested in that. I'm interested in Biggie Small, Tupac at this point, yeah? And what Tupac's best advice to Biggie, you go and listen to Tupac saying, I told Biggie, just sing for the bitches. Don't sing for the guy. The bitches are the ones that go. I apologize for the language, but those are, do you want me to quote Tupac or don't you want me to quote Tupac? And he's like saying, it's the women who are going to buy the records. The guys, they'll just buy it off their mates. The women. So what Akon does is turn this Mr. Lonely from being self-pitying to being ladies. Don't worry, your man might mistreat you, but believe me, when you jack him in, he's going to be singing on his own and thinking, what the fuck have I done? I love that woman. Oh, baby, if I could only get you back, because now without you, I'm lonely. That's all that song is about. He turns it from being self-pitying to being, ladies, man, you all want to hear this, don't you?
A song of female revenge.
Yeah.
Yes. Very clever.
And also, very clever. And also not just female revenge, but female, if I could put it this way, it's like hope that, that man will see sense very soon. He'll go off with some other girl, but then he'll come back because he knows that other girl doesn't give him what you gave him, which is companionship or whatever it might be. And that's why it's number one, mate. I bet you 90% of the people who bought that record are women, lonely.
And there was I thinking it was just a lightweight piece of pap.
Don't get me wrong, Tim. It's not like they play it every day on, classic gold or whatever it might be, radio. They don't play it anymore. You'll never hear that on the radio again, but it worked for the time. You only have to have a hit for the time. Mm-hmm. Snoop Doggy Dogg is number 3 with legends, actually. Snoop Doggy Dogg and Justin Timberlake together with Charlie Wilson of the Gap Band.
I've got to get Justin Timberlake out of my system first. I love this. I love Snoop's groove. I love that thing, the Dr. Dre thing. I love it. It's great. I've never been able to get my head around Justin Timberlake. This kind of pin-headed little fella who walks around as if he's just discovered sex.
What a pity.
I can't, unlike those other guys who's bringing sex back. For God's sake! There's one crime for which I cannot
regret everything you're saying in a moment. You're going to regret it, but you go on. I'm going to let you finish. Go on.
There is one crime for which I cannot forgive him, which is popularising the ludicrous wearing of suits with trainers.
Yeah, well, that is a style, mate. Mark, do you want to pick up? Do you want to school the older in this?
Do you know what, right? I really don't know where I stand with Justin Timberlake. I mean, he seems like a nice enough bloke. The way I would describe it is I would never see if he was available to go for a drink, but if I walked to the bar and he was there, I'd probably pull a chair up and have a drink with him.
Let me tell you about Justin, okay? Justin Timberlake started with NSYNC, yeah? Boy band, NSYNC. That's what he started out with. Just like Michael Jackson started out with a boy band called the Jackson 5, albeit his brothers. Now, you might think, well, Jackson 5 had some tunes. We're still rocking to those. NSYNC, who remembers any of their tunes? Yeah, I'll allow that. He was the youngest kid in NSYNC, but you could tell he was way better than all the rest of them in NSYNC by a long shot. Just like Michael Jackson, after a while, his brothers became an appendage, actually, and he had to break free, and just like Justin Timberlake did. Now, if you look at Justin Timberlake when he was singing with NSYNC, do you think he's anywhere near as glorious a singer as he is as a solo artist? Something happened when he left NSYNC. Do you think he could dance like that? Look at his dance moves. That's pure Michael Jackson. I mean, that's the closest I've seen.
Yeah, he's trying to be Michael Jackson, isn't he?
Well, everybody is. Everybody is at this point. Everybody's trying to be Michael Jackson. Usher. What do you think, Usher? Usher's a carbon copy of Michael Jackson. They're trying all the moves.
He's a bit more earthy, I think, Usher.
I was going to say, in defence of Tim though, Dotun, the thing what Michael Jackson has is he can sing, he can dance, and he's got a cool, right? And you can learn to sing, you can learn to dance, and maybe God might bless you as being the best singer, the best dancer in the world. But that X factor, you just can't bring it in. And that's where, when I say I don't know what I think about Justin, I mean, he seems like a nice enough guy. He's obviously talented, but I'm just not sure how cool he is.
It doesn't have to be cool.
No, but I don't. To be a great singer, you don't. But to get to that place where, you know, maybe all the women want to be with him, but I don't think all the men want to know him. I think that's what
I'm still saying. X Factor is one thing, and I think you've got a point. X Factor is one thing. Being cool's another thing entirely. I'm not sure that all the men or the women wanted to be with Michael Jackson. Not in that way.
But I think they wanted to be friends with him, right? When he's at his peak, I think everyone wants to be able to know Michael. What's Michael doing? What's he saying? You know, what's he into? I don't think you really get that with Justin. I mean, obviously, the celebrity papers and the tabloids will let you believe that is the case, but I'm not sure he's quite as cool, and that's why he's got to hang out with you know, Snoop Dogg, who's the coolest. He's one of the coolest people on the planet.
Yeah, don't blame him for that. Everybody's hanging around with Snoop Dogg, or hanging around with Dr. Dre, or hanging around with whoever the cool person was. At this point, I don't blame Justin for that. I think bring it on, Justin. Yeah, you're doing exactly what everybody else is doing. And also, Snoop ain't there like a mug. Snoop is giving him space, mate. And there's another thing as well. Remember the third party in this, you know, it's not duet, triet or whatever it is, three of them. The song is Snoop Dogg featuring Charlie Wilson and Justin Timberlake. Charlie Wilson is already a legend of the Gap Band at this point. And you hear Justin Timberlake saying, "Go on, Uncle Charlie, preach." You imagine Charlie Wilson of the Gap Band allowing some skinny little white guy to call him Uncle Charlie. Go and preach like that. No, I think if they didn't have respect for Justin Timberlake, he wouldn't be there. I don't think they just thought, let's get Justin, let's get some white guy in like Elvis Presley so that it breaks down any sort of resistance to hearing a gangster rapper and an old school black guy playing a tune. Nah, man, no, I don't think so. I think he's holding his own on this track. In fact, it wasn't the Snoop Dogg's best rap by a long shot. It wasn't Charlie Wilson's best moment by a long shot, but I think the three of them together make it respectful. And you got to have Justin Timberlake in there. I challenge you to look at Justin Timberlake in the NSYNC days and what he became afterwards, and I think you'll start having some respect for him, because unlike Michael Jackson, he wasn't necessarily gifted. I think he was talented, wasn't necessarily gifted, but he worked hard. He worked hard. And when you work hard in that type of music, you're basically working outside your comfort zone, because you've got to be a little bit black. You've got to be a little bit black, not in a sort of a disparaging, taking the mickey kind of way, because I think he is very respectful of the black musical tradition that he finds himself in. And I listen to that song and I'm like, yeah, this is the future, mate. When actually it's not about you being black or white. It's about you feeling and being able to be part of whatever that synergy is between all three of them, you know. And he's very comfortable. I've seen a lot of these white artists, you know, bring on the latest rapper on the block and say, yeah, let's just do it. Yeah, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. You're not convinced yet, Tim?
No, I am actually. That's a really convincing defence. I still can't forgive the trainers with suits.
No,
I can't forgive that.
I can forgive that because I'm rocking that style myself nowadays. You know.
No, I think it's
rocking,
but
honestly,
I take the point about the respect that he's got for Black American music, and I quite like in a kind of lightweight way. I quite like. I don't think he's anything like as versatile as Jackson was.
He hasn't got the songs. He hasn't got the songs.
Well, I also think he's a little bit ludicrous as well. He doesn't seem to realise that he's a bit walking around as if he's just discovered sex, as if, you know, he just invented it.
Keep going on about that.
Unlike those other guys. No, there's something faintly ludicrous about it.
He's got baby looks. You know, look at him. He's a baby face guy. He can't style it like, oh yeah, I'm the baddest. I'm Casanova, because he looks like a kid. What can he can't do anything about that. He's got to rock that style as if I'm a virgin.
Where I want to get back to is you talking about him. You're talking about him having to be a little bit black. And I look at the great days of British music in the kind of early to mid 60s. That was true of everyone, because everyone was playing R&B. Everyone was using R&B as their base. And Roger Daltrey, looking back, will look at himself singing in '65 and saying, "What? I sounded like an old black guy," and he did, and Jagger did as well. And that was the aim. Mm. And somewhere along the line, when the rock tradition, and especially the indie tradition, branches out, too much of that, for my mind, gets lost, and it's lost in Britpop.
Yeah, it's lost in that.
These are people revisiting the mid '60s, but taking the black out.
Yeah. I totally 100%. I think you've nailed that one. I'm not going to argue with that at all. It's an interesting trajectory when you look at sort of music, how it has brought races, for want of a better term, together, but also divided. Punk was like that. Punk, for us few handful of black punks, we were like Martians, mate, because...
But there was a time with reggae.
There was, but remember, we were on the punk side of it. So we were like listening to the late, great Delroy Washington, who died earlier this year from COVID, and I'm still broken up about it. Delroy Washington, martial arts expert, amongst other things. But John Peel used to play these 12 inches that came out on Virgin Records, and Delroy Washington was one of them. And it was like... Give all the praise to Jah. Give all the praise to Jah Selassie. We didn't even know what that meant, but we did our little skinhead moon stomp to it. That was the kind of reggae that we could handle. We couldn't really handle all the dub stuff too heavily, so it had to fit into the right thing. And then you saw groups like Matumbi doing tunes for us, because they would do a speeded up version of After Tonight, which was a kind of like a rock and roll thing. They did a tune called Elizabethan Reggae. They were like getting into the groove of, oh wow, there's a whole multicultural audience.
Well, think of how the Clash led their audience to dub.
Well, they had to, because that's where they came from. That was an intrinsic part of where they, because they had this bass player, Paul Simonon, who grew up in Brixton. Mm-hmm. As far as he was concerned, a bass guitarist was a reggae bass guitarist, whatever the tune was. Yeah. That's why they got Perry.
Put the bass full up on it.
Full up, and get Lee Perry out of Jamaica, one of the most iconic Jamaican reggae producers, to come and produce Complete Control. And Lee Perry didn't have a clue, because he's like, oh, these white boys want it. And he just went and produced it almost like a punk record, whereas actually they wanted him to bring all those like magical mirrored reverbs and all of that stuff in. He didn't do that for Complete Control.
Yeah, Keith Richards had already been through that phase, hadn't he? He'd been like
with Peter Tosh
with Peter Tosh in Jamaica. And I find it regrettable that too much of that got lost by the white musicians. When there's
no, it didn't get lost.
In the Britpop thing, in this chart, there's the Tears, Refugees by the Tears, which has got a kind of anthemic quality. I think it's a guy out of Suede. I think it's what they became. And like so much of that Britpop thing, I can't hear any of the black in it.
But then why don't you listen to Gorillaz, which is number 4? Remember, that's out of Blur.
That's
Feel Good Inc.
Damon,
you see, it hasn't been lost. It's there, but it's for those
it was lost in Blur, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot of that in Blur.
I beg to differ, actually. I do beg to differ with that. You don't hear it necessarily, but you hear the sounds of somebody who has been very eclectic in his choice of music. I do think so. And if you listen to what's that song number 2? Is that what it's called, Mark? The Woohoo! That for me is like a Little Richard song. It's like bamboo woohoo!
Screaming Jay Hawkins, perhaps.
Yeah. Indeed.
Point. I'm having to rethink this.
No, don't
I think
rethink
what you're alluding to a bit, though, Tim, is the experiences of being a white kid versus the experience of being a non-white person, right? And I can only speak from that perspective. When you're a non-white person, you're constantly striving to try and be mainstream, to try and be like, oh no, we want mainstream success, we want that. And then, when I was growing up,
But when you're a white kid, it's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I was just surrounded by other kind of white teens who were crying about Kurt Cobain having killed himself 10 years ago because he was upset that apparently he went mainstream, and I just couldn't get it. I was like, I'm listening to all these garage tracks, all these garage MCs, So Solid Crew and all that, who are desperate to get played in anything bigger than a pirate radio station. And with indie music, with Britpop, that's the point where you see people desperate to basically be successful yet not be successful at the same time. And where, you know, all what I would consider non-white music wants the exact opposite of it, where they want to be really successful and they want everyone to think they are, because that's the way that's what they would see as success, right?
Yeah, it didn't really apply to like Misty and Roots.
No, it didn't. I know Missy Roots very, very well, by the way. I toured with went on tour with them, Missy Roots, saw them play many times, interviewed them many times, did them in Southall, their home base, in Sweden, where they were huge for a moment. Missy Roots were one of the iconic reggae bands. They went through a lot of tragedies because I think one of the members drowned off the coast of Ghana, the brother of the main lead singer and everything. And then they lost their way because they were so umbilically tied to the anti-conservative party movement that found its home in various different things, from the Grunwick strike at the time, which was in Southall, their home base, and you know what was called the what were they called, the Black Sisters or whatever. It was this group of Asian women who were taking on this mighty power of this Grunwick's printing firm for equal rights and justice, essentially. And they tied themselves, they hitched their star to that, or they hitched their wagon to that particular star, and they couldn't get out.
They were playing benefit gigs every night.
Every single night, and there were about 12 of them, so you know they needed some benefit themselves as well. Now I'm looking, the one tune that I wanted to talk about, which I can't find it in the charts now. I thought it was there. Why am I thinking that Eminem was there with Mockingbird?
Yeah, well, he was there or thereabouts.
There or thereabouts with Mockingbird. Yeah. It's a really important tune, this one. I said earlier on, I'll try and sort of link this with Chuck Berry tune. Okay, so Mockingbird by Eminem is a story. It's like a lot of his songs, autobiographical story of the breakup of his relationship. Well, not so much about the breakup of the relationship, but that is part of the narrative. It's about talking to his younger daughter, or you could say daughters, because one of them is his stepdaughter. About, look, you know, not being there for you. I was trying to like just make a living so I could provide for you this and that, and meanwhile your mum's going in and out of jail with drug dependencies, etc.
It's the breakup of a family under economic pressure.
100%. That's exactly what it is. But you know what that song is? I mean, I said Mockingbird, Jose Mourinho, because he mocked the result of this victory of Liverpool 1-0 over Chelsea on the 3rd of May 2005 in the second leg of the Champions League. He mocked it and said, the best team lost. That's what he said, which is a little bit disrespectful. It's not the first time he said it, and there are other people who've said it as well, but just somehow when Jose Mourinho says it, it sticks in the gullet somewhat, because, you know, he's going to blame everybody. He's going to blame the linesman. He's going to blame, you know, the technology. He's going to blame the fans. He's going to blame everything. And he said the best team lost. Well, that's not how football ever works. Is it really, Tim? The best team can't lose, can they?
Well, it's a kind of a false argument from Mourinho anyway, because you know, so often when his teams have been dominated in terms of possession, but they've managed to scrape a win, and people will make the same point, and he'll say, well, it doesn't matter. The result is the only thing that matters. This is an incredible coincidence, because I was thinking a lot about Mockingbird the other day, because
what, the book? Or the song?
No, the song, and not the Charlie and Inez Fox version either. Because I was thinking about the American elections, and it's a song. It's poetry, isn't it? Really,
it is. It is. Of
the collapse of a family under economic pressures. And I was hearing this bloke, a biggie in the Republican Party, I think Stuart Stevens or something his name is, and he's broken with them totally. Mm-hmm. And he's
because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and he said he worked with the Bushes, and, you know, he was high up, and he said, you know, there's always the dark side in there, and we use the dark side, but now the dark side has actually eaten up the party. And he said the Republican Party has become the party of white grievance, which because of the demographic trends in the United States, he thinks is suicide. He thinks what's happening in California, where they're now nothing, he thinks that will eventually roll out over the country, where California used to be their citadel, and now they're not even second place often in California. But if this election is fought on white grievance, which way are the white America going through the situation that Eminem's talking about? Which way are they going to vote?
Well, you can go back to the American Civil War. Remember, that was divided. The dividing line there was about, white grievance over justice and that all men are created equal. So in those days, it was the Democrats who were the Southern powerhouse, because basically,
isn't that ironic, isn't it?
Very ironic. But in the South, that's where they had the most enslaved people. And, the North, for every one or two enslaved people, there was like 1,000 in the South. So they had this powerhouse, and it was like a working man's powerhouse, if you like. And the Democratic Party was the party of the slave owner. And you could argue that the Civil War broke out because the whites weren't having any sort of suggestions that black people were going to be freed. And you can argue that this is being reflected. If we follow your argument there, which I have no reason to dispute, because I think there is that element of it there, then it doesn't bode well. But it's also, not only will the Republican Party ultimately fragment, because you can't change the course of history, and that course is very clear to everybody, and maybe even to Donald Trump himself. I think it's quite clear the trajectory of history. But do you want to? Are you basing your entire political future on winning the next election, or do you think 2 or 3 elections after? Because
that's the point, isn't it?
If Donald Trump wins or loses, in 4 years' time, the Republican Party will have to look in itself and see where they are. And I don't think they're going to be able to easily extricate themselves from the legacy of the past 4 years, and if he wins again, the next 4 years. But that aside, the interesting thing for me...
Before the pandemic, 4 million people a year in the States being evicted from their homes. And of those people who are renting, 25% of them are paying more than 50% of their income on rent.
That's the
I know. But looking at this through the racial perspective of the United States, a lot of those people are white. Which way will they go in the elections?
Well, I'll just come in here a little bit, guys. When Donald Trump got elected, I happened to be in Washington working for the 5 days into it, and I remember going over there, and the plane was full of other journalists and producers and stuff going over. I remember talking about it, and we were like, really want to meet somebody who's kind of pro-Trump, because we suspected, like over here, where a lot of people vote Conservative but don't ever admit it, and they don't. People over here in England, in the good old days anyway, used to not talk about politics. But what really struck me in those few days when we'd be out voxing people is how quickly people were to air their grievances and tell you about, look, I can't afford healthcare, I can't afford rent, and then would go on to say, that's why I'm voting Trump. For me, the maths didn't quite add up, but obviously. But
you've got to let people vote according to their experiences. You've got to sort of accept that. It doesn't make sense to the way that people vote in other countries will never make sense to us, and the way we vote doesn't make sense to them. My mates in Paris called me up almost in tears before the referendum on the EU vote here and said, "Oh, tell me, Dotun, you won't leave us. We want Britain to be in the EU. They must stay in the EU." I'm like, don't worry. I don't think we're leaving. Oh, well, it just goes to show that even I don't know the way that we vote over here.
But I think the thing is, though, Dotun, after 5 days of being in Washington, I totally wasn't. I wasn't as surprised as I was 5 days previous when Donald Trump won. I mean, I still thought Hillary was going to win it, and obviously she won the popular vote. But when they won it, I was like, yeah, looking at your system, I can see that winning. With the Brexit vote, considering I lived here my whole life, I still don't. I just don't think I meet that many people who came to vote Brexit.
I do. And you want to go up north in the places where people have never voted. Paris is a long, long, long way away from Sunderland or Middlesbrough, where people are experiencing hardships. And remember, the papers over here had spent the last 30 or 40 years sticking the boot into the EU. I challenge you to find one positive front page headline about the EU in the 50 or 40 years of, from the mainstream papers, and including The Guardian or whatever else it might be. We stuck the boot into the EU for too long, and that sits in after a while. It's interesting, though, that you said, and I do want to bring this podcast to a close, or we want to bring it to a close, because there'll be people who have cycled all the way home now, and they're thinking, okay, I'm about to go to bed, and you lot are still talking. Or they've done 10 miles on their treadmill in the gym. They've had enough, mate. Yes. Enough. But interesting what Mark says, though, because I've lost it now, haven't I? When he said a moment ago about, I was going to tie it into the...
While you're collecting your thoughts,
I don't think I'll get it back, but yeah, go on.
Just because looking at the charts, there's one that just stands out for me because it's so brilliant. It's quality. It's a beautifully crafted song, wonderfully sung, one that will stand a test of time, and that's "Girl" by Destiny's Child.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic record of female solidarity.
Well, you're talking about Queen Bee there. Queen Bee knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
If you what's the one about? You should have put a ring on it. You should have put a ring on it, Mark.
Yeah.
I mean, they know what they're doing. Them lot. They were totally on point, and they'll reunite again. Sorry.
She's just untouchable, isn't she?
Yeah, well, she knows her audience, really. If I can go back to the Eminem, though, the Mockingbird thing, I've said, like, Jose Mourinho, after the match, he's going on about, we were the best team. I felt the power of Anfield. It was magnificent, but so did the linesman feel the power of Anfield, because why otherwise would he have given the goal, etc., etc. But that Eminem Mockingbird song, do you know what it is, Tim? When I sat listening to it, all I could hear was long distance information. Give me Memphis, Tennessee. Try to find the party, trying to get in touch with me. She could not leave her number, but I know who placed the call, 'cause my uncle took the message and he wrote it on the wall. Because that was the first tune I'd ever heard of about divorce. He does a completely similar thing to Eminem, or rather the other way around. Eminem does exactly the same thing, because the subject of the song is not the wife, is not the one that is divorced, it's the
kid. Yeah, the daughter.
It's exactly the same as that. And props to Eminem, because he does, a very good job.
Brilliant.
Don't forget the poet of rock and roll was there first, mate.
Now, how many roads lead back to Chuck Berry?
All roads. Like, how many roads lead back to Shakespeare? Shakespeare managed to capture every aspect of human emotion, and it seems that Chuck Berry did too. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Available on Twitter. We got a Twitter handle. Is that what the youth call it? A handle?
Yeah, it's a handle.
Which is Brazil Shirt Pod. I believe there's even a Facebook page.
There is, and we're on YouTube now. Did you know that?
The page is 11 to 29 Media. 11 little dash in the middle. There's a little dash in the middle.
Yeah,
or is it a dot dash?
It's a hyphen. It's a hyphen.
Right, hyphen. Yeah. 11-29 Media. So this show will be available on YouTube as well, and I think people can subscribe.
And you do know what YouTube is, don't you, Tim? I'm just checking.
I don't really know what subscribing is, but I'm sure it's very.
And whilst we're at it as well, we do encourage you to suggest Brazilian shirt names. My Brazilian shirt name for the former Chelsea manager after this match, 1-0 Liverpool versus Chelsea, second leg of the semi-final of the Champions League, 3rd of May 2005. My Brazilian shirt name for him is Mourinho Mockingbird, but I'm sure you can do better than that. And thanks for those of you who sent in Brazilian shirt names for players Mark, this was after which of our Brazilian shirt name podcasts?
No, this is for today's pod. So I asked
for
them
today's pod.
Yeah.
So Jamie Carragher would be Thiago Scouse. Does that make sense to you? You lot love it? Yeah.
Scouser.
Thiago
Scouser. I can't get that high.
I know you can't, but you did well.
Scouser.
Frank Lampard.
I talk like that all the time. Must hurt.
Frank Lampard would be late Ronaldo, because he does
very good.
Late runs. Yeah, late Ronaldo, not bad. Andy Wilde would be Ghostinho. It's disrespectful. Ghostinho, Andy Wilde. I can't remember much of him on the pitch, actually.
No, Andy Wild's the person who suggested that name for Mourinho. That's it.
Oh, right, for Mourinho. Okay.
I thought it was a linesman for linesman.
Yeah, okay.
Linesman.
Yeah, and who else have we got? We've got for Arjen Robben, Dutch Messi. In terms of I got nothing. Which of those should we go for then? Which of those should we go for as the Brazilian shirt name of this podcast?
I like Thiago Scouser.
Thiago Scouser. Mark, you happy with Thiago Scouser?
I like Thiago Scouser, and maybe there might be a Thiago at Anfield by the time this podcast goes out. We don't know. But I really like late Ronaldo as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's clever. That's clever. All right, that wins.
Late Ronaldo wins, even though Mark has got obvious skin in the game, if you know what I mean. Let's leave that to one side. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Until the next Brazilian Shirt Name podcast.